Hey guys, this is AI Gaming 1776, and a few days ago I made the claim that the 2 GB GTX 960 sucks for Just Cause 3. And that is a claim that I still stand by. It's something I still feel, something I still believe in. But if you notice, two things going on right now. We are getting 60 frames per second, and we happen to be using the 2 GB card. So that's cool, but there's also a lot of weirdness going on the screen. Have you noticed that everything doesn't quite look perfect, and for a minute things were kind of shimmering and there were lines going through the screen? Well, the reason that's happening is because I'm using NVIDIA's variable refresh rate. And the way you can do that is you go into the control panel for NVIDIA and you can set that. So let me talk to you about syncing the game really quickly. Go into options, go into graphics. You can have vsync on or vsync off. If vsync is on in this game, then the 960 kind of gets locked down to 30 frames per second a lot, especially if you have the settings turned up. And some people are not going to want to play locked at 30 frames per second. If you have vsync off, though, then the frame rate is going to go all over the place. You're going to have a very unreliable frame rate, and it can still try to lock itself at 30 frames per second. It can actually go above 60 sometimes. You can have some screen tearing. So neither of those two choices are good. The vsync on, not so good. Vsync off, not so good. So this is like the emergency choice right here. And you go into the NVIDIA's control panel and you turn on variable refresh rate. Now, when you go into the NVIDIA control panel, whatever you tell it to do for vertical sync there, it's actually going to override whatever you tell it to do in the game. Okay, and I'll show you all that. I'll walk you through it. So, like, see how we have vertical sync? We're telling this game to have no vsync at all, but we're keeping a fairly stable 60 frames per second. I say fairly stable as it goes down into the 50s. But fairly stable compared to going down to 30, I suppose. So anyway, that's because the NVIDIA control panel option that I chose is overriding what the game is doing. You see what I mean? Let's go over here and find something to blow up really quickly. Okay, so we got, where am I facing? Okay, so there's this here, and there's that there. I probably really want to go there. Let me remove the waypoint. Let's do that. Yeah, I want to go down to the tip of the island over here. As you can see, it's kind of pretty, but there's all kinds of bubbles and lines and waves that go through the screen. And this is one of the reasons why I don't like variable refresh rate. But the problem is, if you're going to use a 2 GB GTX 960 and your choices are to have no syncing at all, or turn vsync on and be locked at 30 frames per second, or use variable refresh rate, you're in a position where you just have to pick your poison. You just have to pick which one you're going to do, and that's going to depend on you. I know a lot of people in the comments say they prefer a steady 30 frames per second. Me personally, out of all the options that, oh man, that was not cool. Out of all the options that exist, with a 2 GB card, I would rather play it like this with variable refresh rate and have it be at least kind of close to 60 frames per second. I would definitely prefer to play it like this, but I wouldn't necessarily be happy playing it like this. Oh, I didn't want to pull the parachute out. I wouldn't necessarily be happy playing it like this because, as you can see, there's a whole bunch of lines and bubbles and waves and things like that in the screen, and that's not, yeah, I just did it again, and that's not really enjoyable. These surface-to-air missiles like make using a helicopter pretty much not the greatest option. When I did earlier videos, I was all about using helicopters, but as you go further into the game, there's so many surface-to-air missiles that it's pretty hard to use the helicopter. If you are somehow good at keeping it moving and aiming and how do I say, like, if you can basically circle around the base, aim at things and blow them up, if you have that kind of skill set, then you can do it and dodge the surface-to-air missiles, but I don't. I normally have to kind of sit still and shoot at the thing that I'm trying to blow up. So that's kind of a bummer. I don't know if there's a mod that you can do or an upgrade. I have no idea, but it is a bummer because the helicopters are one of the coolest things in the game, but I'm constantly getting them shot down. All right, frame rate just went down to 42 frames per second. Hopefully I don't die on you guys. I don't want to make you have to keep watching load screens. The problem is, and I've talked about this, I've tried to make this video several times now. This is, I don't even know how many times I've tried to make this video, like six or seven times. And I keep having things like this happen where I die a lot, and then I'm like, all right, I'm going to shut the game off. And I even went over to this space, which I thought would be easier to deal with. But the difficulty level in this game is really inconsistent. Sometimes I've got videos that I've posted where I literally am waltzing around these installations, putting C4 on stuff, and I'm coming nowhere near dying. I'm coming nowhere near it. And then other times it's like I'm just constantly dying and getting game over screens and unfortunately loading screens. And I don't want to make you guys have to watch a bunch of loading screens. So what I'm going to do is if I'm getting my butt kicked too much, I'm going to bail. But I was trying to show you the performance because it's not going to keep the 60 frames per second. See, it just went into the 40s. It goes down as low as 30. All right. So again, here, let me get out of here and let me make this point. You are picking your poison. If you have a 2 gigabyte GTX 960, you can turn VSync on and it will more or less lock you at 30 frames per second. All right. So you can do that. You can turn VSync on. Or you can turn it off and your frame rate can go all over the place. Or you can turn on variable refresh rate like I have on now. That's another option. You're picking your poison no matter what you do. None of those three options are perfect. I personally prefer to play the game with VSync on with a 4 gigabyte GTX 960 versus the 2 gigabyte. Because I made a video saying that the 2 gigabyte GTX 960 is not a very good card. Well, it's not a very good card anymore. I made that point in this. Geez, why do I suck? I made that point in the video. All right, it's not a very good card anymore because so many games are using so much VRAM now. The 2 gigabyte GTX 960, if it had come out a year and a half ago, it would be awesome. And even when it did come out in February of this year, so 10 months ago, it wasn't that bad. But there's a lot of games that are using a ton of VRAM right now. And that list keeps growing, and I think it's going to continue to grow. So we're reaching a point now where the 4 gigabyte card does have a tangible benefit over the 2 gigabyte card. But with all that said, if you're watching this and you have the 2 gigabyte card and you've been worried about whether or not you can play the game, you can use variable refresh rate. And as you can see, we've got some weird screen tearing that I'm not a fan of. But if you can put up with the screen tearing, this is probably your best way to go. I've not played it on console yet. I have a feeling that I would still prefer it playing it just like this than I would to playing on console. I would see there's a lot of people, a lot of games reviewers giving this game bad scores, probably because they played on PlayStation 4, probably because they played at 30 frames per second, but not even really keeping 30 frames per second. And as a result, this is the kind of game where you want the camera to move around easily. This is the kind of game where you want to be able to disable motion blur. And I think if you have to play on console at 30 frames per second, not even keeping 30 frames per second and having motion blur, I think it's going to suck. And I'd probably give it a low review score too. If you have a GTX 970, the game's pretty decent. Obviously, if you have something stronger than a 970, it's even better. Well, this is interesting. The water towers are always like oddly difficult for me to take out. So let me see. Oh man, I didn't want to make you have to sit through a loading screen. I was literally trying to jump out of the helicopter. I've posted so many videos on this game. Go look at my early videos, like go through my uploads, and I've posted so many videos where a helicopter gets shot by a missile. Here, let's get out of here. Let me show you that NVIDIA control panel. All right. I've posted so many videos and I've shown time and time again where your helicopter can get blown up and it's on fire. And while it's on fire and after it's been blown up, you can still get out of it and live. And for some reason, the helicopters keep blowing up. They're just not as viable now. And that's boring. Anyway, go to your desktop, right click on the desktop, go to NVIDIA control panel. Wait for all this to load. It takes a while. All right. In the upper left-hand corner, you have 3D settings. Manage 3D settings is where you want to be. It's where we happen to be right now, but that's where you want to be. So if you're somewhere else in here, you need to get there. So then what you do is you take this bar over here to the right and you scroll down with the bar. If you use your mouse wheel, sometimes you can accidentally change a setting in there, not even realize that you changed the setting, not even realize which setting you changed. So the safe way to do it is to drag this bar. Anyway, vertical sync is set to adaptive. But now we're going to say use the 3D application setting, and then we're going to hit apply. Apply is down here. Now normally I have the thing windowed, so apply would be here under the restore button, but it wouldn't be like all the way down at the bottom of the screen. Anyway, now we're going to start Just Cause 3. The game takes a long time to load, so I probably shoulda, coulda, woulda structured this differently. See, what I did before is I made another video on this, and I hit Alt-Tab, and I went to the control panel, and I tried to change the variable refresh rate. That didn't work. So I had to scrap that whole video. I'd made the video, and I tried to show you guys without having to reload the game. But it ended up I had to quit the game to get it to respect whatever I had changed in the control panel. So if I started out with variable refresh rate, and then I changed to using the 3D setting, then what I had to do was restart the game. So I apologize for that. Anyway, as you can see, it takes a long time to load. This is one of those single player games where you have to log into a server to play it, which is pretty much some BS. I assume they're doing it as DRM, but it is pretty much some BS. Now you can actually play the game in offline mode. But my computer's on the internet or whatever, so it's going to log in. I think if I had turned my internet off, it might have tried to log in and then gone to online mode. Now, the funny thing is sometimes you can get kicked from the server in the game. You can get kicked right off the server, and the game freezes, and then a little box pops up, a little dialog box, and it asks if you want to try to reconnect to the server or play offline. You can tell it to play offline. And then you're playing and you're minding your own business, and all of a sudden the game freezes again, and it says it's going to try to log into the server, and it's pretty annoying. I know that these are like a lot of bad things I'm saying, but at the same time, I like the game. It's kind of like a drug in that regard. You know, there's so many complaints to be made, but here I am playing it anyway. I don't know if I showed you the graphics earlier. Did I? I think I did. Here they are again. So vsync is off. We're going to do that first. And then these graphics are actually kind of high for a 2 gig card, because on the lowest settings, this game uses 2 gigabytes of VRAM. Now, I also don't think the game looks as good with the rain. We're already getting a ton of screen tearing, a ton of choppiness, like a lot, like right off the bat. So that's one of the reasons why you would choose syncing. And it goes back to why I said that's one of the reasons why you're picking your poison. See how we're at 70 frames per second right now? And that sounds good, like, oh, we're at 70 frames per second. Well, it's not that good when the screen is being all choppy and wavy and doing screen tearing. All right, let's see if there's something to blow up over here. There is a tower right there. Let's see if it's as close as it looks. Turn on the C4. See, I don't know how the difficulty level works in this game. Like, oh, wait a minute. I don't want to, I'm saving this port. I'm saving that. All right, where were we before? We must have been over here. So it's behind us. Yeah, it's this thing. Let's go blow that one up instead. Anyway, I don't know how the difficulty level works in the game. I don't know if, like, since I've died a couple times, if it's going to be easier now. But sometimes you can just waltz into these installations and just start planting C4 everywhere, and nobody's really effectively stopping you. Like, you hear gunshots all over the place, but you're not in any real danger. And I think anyone that's played the game will know that that's like a real experience you can have. I wonder if I can just take this propane tank. Oh, that was worthless. That was so worthless. I should have just gone to the C4. All right. So we're already... Oh, whoa. The propane tank did take it down. All right, then. As the frame rate goes into the 80s. So now we're going to go over here. All right, we need to shoot these guys. Wow, that's a lot of guys. Yeah, usually the guys with the rifles, they're not really that big of a threat. The sniper rifle guys are a big threat. Even when these guys get in a large group, they're usually not. It just depends. The game is so inconsistent about what's dangerous and what's not dangerous. Didn't I already? Yeah, I already put a C4. Oh, okay. Got to blow it. See all that screen tearing? Frame rate went into the 50s. There is a lot of screen tearing with no vsync. So again, if you are a 2 gigabyte GTX 960, I hate it when I do that. I do that pretty often. So if you are a 2 gigabyte GTX 960 user, then you have to pick your poison. Because check this out. Let's turn G-Sync on, not G-Sync. Let's turn vsync on and see what the frame rate is. It's 60. It's making me look really bad right now. That's making me look really... This is the best the game has ever performed. And other people have commented... Look, it just went into the 30s. Other people have commented on my videos that their 2 gigabyte GTX 960s also struggle with this game. Now, I've made 2 videos about this so far, about the inconsistency in the performance. So... where do I even go with this? Because I'm shocked at how high that frame rate is. Let's go around and see what it stays at, because that's remarkably high. Like it never. Okay, now it's there we go. Now it's in the 40s, and it's stuttering, and now it's in the 30s, 33. I was gonna say it's never like 60. Like it's never 60. That even what we see now, we're at 30. I was going to say, like, I know this game normally does not play at 60 frames per second with this card. Not with vsync on. So you see that? It's a very inconsistent experience as you watch that frame rate counter. Look, 60, go over here. It's in the 50s. It was just at 30 when I was flying. So, of course, I'm going to fly again because, you know, I want to validate what I'm saying. So let's fly. Anyway, the game's been very inconsistent with the performance. With the 4 gigabyte GTX 960, you can max the game out. I've put video up showing this. You can completely max the game out and play at about 45 frames per second with vsync on. However, now we're at 30. See how inconsistent this frame rate is? All right, so you can max the game out at 30 frames per second. 45 frames per second with a GTX 960 4 gigabyte card. You can do that. But then sometimes it'll lock itself at 30 frames per second with vsync on, maxed out. And it's like, why? Why is it doing this? Why is it performing inconsistently? Well, right now you're seeing the game perform better than usual. The only reason I can think of that this game will perform better than usual and worse than usual, the only reason I can think of that it would do this is if that online DRM somehow affects performance. Because what else would cause that? I mean, maybe you guys know in the comments. You know, it's very frustrating to play, and this is the only game I've seen where it's this bad. Far Cry 4 does this too, but not to this extent. It's very frustrating to play your game from day to day and not know how it's going to perform. Like, oh, it's performing a little bit better today. Oh, wait a minute, it's performing worse. Oh, and now it's performing about like normal. This game does that. Like normally, here, let me stand still. Normally with vsync on, with the 2 gigabyte card, with these settings, it wouldn't even really keep 60. It'd probably be like 52 or something right now. So I was surprised when it went to 60, but as you saw, as soon as you start flying or whatever, and like you wouldn't fly when you play this game, come on, you're going to fly. It went down to 30, although now we're flying and it's staying at 60. So it might be something to do with that town. Yeah, as you can see, the game looks kind of good right now. It's kind of it just went to 30. You see that? We're at 30. 35, 34, 32, 33, 37. And we're walking. We're not even flying. 42. So it's inconsistent. Now remember at the start of the video, we had variable refresh rate on. So it goes back to this. With the 2 GB card, you pick your poison. Let's turn VSync off again so you can see that. You can have VSync off and risk dealing with screen tearing and choppiness and very erratic frame rate. See, we're in the 50s, but it can go as high as 80. And there's a ton of screen tearing right now. Now we're in the 70s. We were just in the 50s, just in the 70s. Now we're in the 60s. Now we're in the 70s. Now we're in the 60s. So you can play like this with VSync off and your frame rate can go everywhere. Right? So you can do that. Well, how did I miss that? How did I miss that again? It lit up red. Anyway. So you can have very inconsistent frame rate and screen tearing with VSync off. You can have VSync on and have inconsistent frame rate. Or you can do variable refresh rate and have fairly consistent frame rate, except when it gets busy, it can go down into the 30s. But that's probably the best option for this game. Now, normally I am not a fan of variable refresh rate. I feel like, again, I feel like it makes things look out of focus. It makes things look a little bit muddy. I do not like the aesthetic that it provides on a normal monitor, but it is probably the most viable option for this game with this graphics card. All right, so let me wrap up and say my little piece on the 2 GB GTX 960. And I think I said it earlier in this video, and I know I've said it before, but I'm going to keep saying it again and again. The 960 is a good card. It's not a bad card at all. And if you only play at 1080p, I think the 960 is a good enough card for a lot of people. I would not recommend a 950 or anything like that. I would recommend a 960. All right. The problem is the 2 GB card. It's getting to a point where more and more games play pretty. If you let me say it like this: if you take the 2 GB 960 and the 4 GB 960, and you play a game on those two cards back to back, same computer, same monitor, same game, same settings, the only thing that you're changing is going between the 2 GB card and the 4 GB card. What happens is we're reaching a point where there are games that play better on the 4 GB card. Now, even going back to when GTA 5 came out, and GTA 5 uses a lot of VRAM, GTA 5 played surprisingly well on the 2 GB 960. And I've got videos where I've shown that. Okay? So even when GTA 5 came out, I still thought the 960 was a good card. Now, there were a few games that didn't play too well on it, like Assassin's Creed Unity. Can't think of some other ones right now off the top of my head, some of the older titles. But as this year has gone on, like the first game I played that sucked on the 2 GB 960 was Arkham Knight. And I'll tell you why. Arkham Knight on the 2 GB 960 has to load lower resolution textures. And the game will play at a decent frame rate, as decent as can be expected with how the port runs. And like in the 50s. In the 50s, it can hit 60 frames per second. But it doesn't have enough VRAM, so you have to load like the normal textures or low or whatever they're called, or maybe even medium now that they've done some patches. But the point being, I feel bad for doing this, but I haven't hooked a cow to anything yet, so let's try it out. Okay, yeah, you can do that. All right, so anyway, Arkham Knight was the first game that I noticed to suck on this graphics card because the textures looked ugly. Now, something else you got to realize is for a long time, games, even with textures, would let you choose low, medium, high, very high, and ultra. If Arkham Knight had done that, then I think the 2 GB 960 still could have played the card well because there would have been some kind of compromise. But there were only like 2 or 3 options for the textures at the time. And I think even now there's only like 3 options for the textures. And the problem is all but the best option for textures looks bad, in my opinion. So I know I'm talking a lot. I always talk way too much in these videos. But the point is, this is the year that I started noticing, let me rephrase that. The games that came out this year made me start noticing that, okay, the 2 GB card is at a real disadvantage, like a real actual performance disadvantage. And even a site like Digital Foundry backs up what I'm saying. You know, they've noticed the same thing. So Assassin's Creed Syndicate benefits from the 4 GB card. Just Cause 3 benefits from the 4 GB card. Arkham Knight benefits from the 4 GB card. There's other games that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head. Now, I will say this. The 2 GB card, it's enough for Fallout 4 if you're going to play at 1080p. The 2 GB card, it's enough for The Witcher 3 if you're going to play at 1080p. Even if you max The Witcher 3 out, that game doesn't use 2 GB of VRAM. Like, even with the GTX 970 fully maxed out, that game, Witcher 3, does not use more than 2 GB of VRAM. So, you can still play some pretty good games. Heck, even I think even Crysis 3 I've played on the 2 GB card just fine. I'll have to double check, but I'm pretty sure I have. It's just, there's something about, I say there's something about, we all know why. But a lot of games are using way more VRAM now, like a lot more. You know, when, like Crysis 3, for example, not Crysis 3, Far Cry 3 used less than 2 GB of VRAM, but Far Cry 4 I think uses more than 3, maybe even more than 4 at 1080p. I think just more than 3, like 3 point something. And who knows what Far Cry 5 is going to use. Because as cards have more and more VRAM on them, the game makers, the developers are going to be like, well, screw it, let's leverage that VRAM. And it's just going to create a situation where all these 2 GB cards out there, like I feel like they're going to be strong enough, core, you know, the strength of their cores and all that business, their stream processors or however it is you go about discussing the power that's not VRAM. You know what I mean? Like how the graphics cards get their performance, but not talking about VRAM. You know, they otherwise can play the game. They can play it, but they don't have enough VRAM. You know, so then they can't just because of the VRAM, the lack of it. They have 2 GB of VRAM and then they can't play it. So that's where we're at. You can use variable refresh rate. Oh, look, the cow's still there. I really do feel bad about that. Like I'm being honest, guys. Like I normally don't try to torture animals in video games or whatever. I know it's not a real animal, but you know, whatever. It's just, I normally don't. But I was curious because everyone said you could tether the cow, so dang it, I wanted to give it a try. Anyway, go. The lighting looks pretty good here. There's all kinds of screen tearing with this vsync off. Let's turn it on. So I showed you the variable refresh rate works, and that's probably the best way to go. There was somebody in the comments of another video that mentioned using variable refresh rate, and it was in relation to something else. But I got to thinking about it. I was like, you know what? I'm going to try it with this card in this game. And here we go. I'm going to give that person props in the description of this video. I don't know their name offhand. So I can't. Oh, wow. The frame rate went into the 20s just now. And I'm not sure why that car is acting so buggy. But yeah, somebody else in some other context advised using variable refresh rate as a way of dealing with screen tearing. And I was like, wait a minute. I wonder what kind of frame rate we could get in this game if we used variable refresh rate. And I was hoping you guys could see this. If you stand on the cars, I actually think it's one of the best things to do in this game if you want to appreciate the graphics. Because you're not flying around and you're not parachuting. You're just standing here, but you get to go around and appreciate the lighting and appreciate the textures. The game has decent lighting. I mean, it's not the best lighting you ever saw in your life, but it has decent lighting, even though we turned a bunch of the lighting stuff off. SSAO is off. Global illumination is off. So I'm not sure if edge fade or whatever it's called, if that is a lighting setting or not, but it still looks pretty good. Anyway, guys, there you go. Those are your 3 options for this game. You can do variable refresh rate in the NVIDIA control panel, and I showed you how to do that. You can do vsync on and you can do vsync off. Thank you so much for watching these videos. Hopefully this video has helped you out. Please like and subscribe and all that jazz. It really helps me out. And y'all have yourselves a good day or a good night or whatever time it is that you're watching this. Have yourselves a good one.